Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Coffee Q&A. And I thought that I had set this up so that we would be in horizontal orientation, but well, it just refuses to do that. So what's going on? How you doing? Welcome back to the Coffee Q&A. This is your daily dose of Coffee Q&A here in the Ono Coffee channel, and I am Jay, your host, and we do this live stream talk about coffee most every Monday through Friday. So how's it going? Hope it's going well. Today I thought we would do a little bit about coffee cupping, and because we roasted the decaf yesterday. Kent, how are you? Good to see you. And yesterday we roasted a bunch of decaf. Well, actually, we didn't. I finished before we started the stream, but we roasted some coffee. And in most parts of the coffee industry, the general practice, aloha to you, Keone, is that coffee roasters will roast one day and then do their quality control cupping, QC cupping, the next day. And so it's the next day, so I thought we'd do that. Now, on our show here, we've kind of learned that it's not always the greatest idea, right? We found that coffee 24 hours later is not as great as it is either straight out of the roaster or a week later. But we're going to do it today just because, we're going to do it. So, hope you're doing well. So I've got 5 cups here, right? So if you're interested in seeing this, I have put a link in the description below. It turns out when I was doing it in the car. So it's a Google. It turns out it's a Google link for a Google search for SCA cupping forms, and you can choose one of the cupping forms there. I used the one that came from Atlantic Specialty Trading, is the one that I was kind of making notes on. But it's all pretty much standardized, and the categories. I need to go grab the paper. All right, so anyway, so there's several different categories that we're going to be looking at. Power plant, how are you? Am I looking kind of tilted? There we go, better. There's 10 different categories that you're going to be reviewing in a typical coffee cupping. Fragrance, aroma, flavor. What else fragrance and aroma, flavor, aftertaste, acidity, body, uniformity, balance, clean cup, sweetness, and then there's an overall score. And so these 10 categories theoretically have a 10-point possible rating for them. Most of the times you don't normally go below 7 in any category because, well, you're typically dealing, and especially coffee, we're dealing with a certain level of quality of coffee, so you don't necessarily have to worry about a lot of heavy defects. Good morning to you, Maku. Because there's really two major ways of grading coffee. One is the way we do it in the specialty side of things, where we're looking for attributes to the coffee. What are the really positive qualities of the coffee? The larger side of the business, which is the commercial side of the business, actually looks at when they're doing cuppings, which is a process very similar to what we're going to go through today. They're looking for acceptable number of defects, right? Because while in specialty we're looking to tell you as the guest what are the great things about this coffee, what makes this coffee special, what is the delicious notes of the coffee. In the commercial side of things, they're working with, the commercial side is really based on commodity and price and performance. And in order to get the lowest price, the best price, you need to have there's compromises that need to be made. Like, you're not going to sort the coffee as highly as you would for specialty. So when they're grading commercial coffees, they're looking for what we call acceptable number of defects. So a contract will be written for a particular company that's looking for coffee, and they're going to say, we want it to be soft, we want it to have so many defects per sample. Like, so a typical grading sample is 300 grams. So within that sample, they want to have an acceptable number of defects. So there could be different taints, there could be things like broken or CBB damage, there could be diesel notes from the way that it was processed, tar notes. These are all things that, or all what we call all blacks, which are, just not very, well, terrible. Actually, the existence of a single fully black bean in specialty pretty much negates that from being considered specialty if you're grading it. So the whole process is the whole method of grading is a little bit different for commercial. Oh, the chair. Yeah, the chair. I got this at the thrift store for $15. Actually, I had been looking. I go to this thrift store like once a week because they sometimes have tools, and once I found Festool at that place, just sandpaper though. And this I've been seeing for like $15 for a few weeks, and I've been sitting in it, and I was like, this is fairly comfortable. And I was thinking, it's a Windsor style chair, right? Meaning that it's got these spokes. Now it's fairly commercially made. Like, it's not. You can tell by the way that the spindles are spun that they're not hand carved because they're really super smooth. Yeah, but I thought, that'd be an interesting thing to. It's pretty comfortable, right? So I can sit here for a little while, but also I can use it as a model because I'm looking for angles of the different legs and stuff like that. Anyway, we've got a. Power plant says aroma is my favorite criteria. Oh yes, absolutely. So in this particular case, we're going to be looking at aroma in two different ways. We're going to be smelling it as what we call fragrance. So the dried coffee, the dry ground coffee, and then we'll be smelling it again for aroma, and we define that as being when the coffee has been saturated with water. And so we're going to take samples of the coffees, and these are 9-ounce rocks glasses. These are made by a company called Libby, which is a commercial glass manufacturer, mostly for restaurants. These are originally designed for, what do you call it? This is originally designed for like cocktails, for mixing drinks. This particular style is called the Gibraltar, and they're fairly reasonably priced, and you buy them boxes of 3 dozen. And I've got a big box here that I've just kind of had for many, many years, and it's been perfectly fine. And I like these because they're clear, so you can see through them, and you can just see any kind of activity that may be happening inside the cup. You don't necessarily need that. I mean, most of the industry is fueled by these kind of cups. This I got from the Consejo in Salvador. And these, of course, are ceramic, so you can't see them. But here you can, and I do like this. And the volumes are relatively similar. The volumes don't necessarily mean too much. Like, these are 9-ounce glasses, and what we do is we put 13 grams of coffee in each one. You can use kind of any standard that you want. The important thing is that you want to have a good ratio of coffee to water. And if you remember, like, we talk about like my normal ratio of 2 grams for every ounce. This is 9 grams. It should be 18 grams according to that. But we always, many years ago, we started using 13, and I don't remember exactly why that happened, but we've always stayed with it because it's what we've been using. So it allows us to, look at things consistently over time with the same dose ratio, right? So that's kind of the thing. Paige, good morning to you. Kent says, I'm drinking excellent Kenyan decaf right now, CO2 processed, roasted in, ooh. Is that the one from, that's not the one from James, is it? Mr. Blue, hello, how are you? Good to see you. Dev, good morning, good morning. Power Plant says, I love the dank, feculent, skunky note. I like that, dank and feculent. I'm going to have to look that up because that's a very much an SAT word. And those of you who may not be from the United States, SATs are what they call scholastic aptitude tests. So when you graduate from high school here and you want to go to college, you must take the SATs so that the colleges will know how smart or how dumb you are, and they can then decide whether or not They will accept your level of incompetence. So feculent, actually, gosh, that's a word I've never really used. So I'm going to have to look that up and add that to my lexicon. Power Plant says, French Duralex, the king of glasses. Oh, the Duralex, they make the ones that are, I think they make some that are that like faceted and fluted. I really like them. I think those are just cool. Cool. Paige says, I think I love the funk of natural anaerobic processing. Yes. I'm a fan of natural processed coffees. There's a lot of people in the business that are not fans. They're very much against it. So, but you know, what are you going to do with those people? Those people they're crazy people. They're crazy people. Keith, how are you, man? Good, welcome to the show. So we've got our scale. This is, again, our cheapy Temu scale. And we're going to measure out 13 grams of each. Oh, I got 5 cups. Okay, so if you decide to look at the cupping forms, you're going to see that there are certain sections that have these 5 boxes. In a typical or in a critical specialty coffee cupping, you're going to use 5 samples of each coffee of the coffee. And the reason is that you want to see consistency and uniformity across the different samples, right? So if you have, and this is why you want 300-gram samples, because if you're using, 5 samples at 13 grams a piece, you're already at what? 70 grams. Is that right? I think that's right. So you can do 2 setups like this if you roast all 300. Okay, so 5 samples allows us to see, and also what we're looking for, if there's any defects in the coffee. Like, let's say if you just have 1 cup and you're just cupping from the 1 cup and there's a defect in it. Let's say there's like a potato defect or some kind of phenolic kind of taint to it or something like that. Your impression is that, oh, this coffee is bad, or this coffee has that characteristic, and but you want to have multiple coffees so that you can see if it's just one isolated example, or is it across the spectrum of the 5. Now, most of the time for like a lot of like professional cuppings, we'll just use 3. And that's enough. Now, technically, for a quality control cupping like we're theoretically doing today, we're just tasting the coffee to see how it did from the roasting yesterday. Is it within the parameters that we want? Is it acceptable? Should we reject it, which we won't, because there's a good 60 pounds here of it. And I'm a roasting genius, so there's no need to worry about any kind of defects, right? Any kind of problems. But you're going to do, so you'll do, a lot of times we'll just do 3 for tasting coffees. But in a QC cupping, especially when you're doing larger scale roasting, where you've got a lot of batches, and here's the truth, is that if you really want to do really good QC cupping, you need to take samples from every batch. And in the older days, I did that a lot more, especially at the old roastery. Since our roasting setup's a little bit different today, it's not as conducive to that. But you just basically, what I would do is I would just take a small scoop of the coffee, toss it in a Ziploc bag, write down the date and the batch number, and then you could just go through it and cup it. And basically, you do 1 sample for every roast lot, and then you just go through it and see, are there any problems, any issues? Of course, when you've homogenized them all together, well, if there is a problem, well, you kind of hosed yourself. But a lot of that can be mitigated because you're buying good quality coffee, or you're buying coffee to a quality that it's a known quantity. The quality is a known quantity in your equation, so that can mitigate those needs. All right, so let's do some weighing. I've got the big bag I just have the big bag of coffee here. So we're gonna 0 to scale. 13 grams of each. This is really this whole thing here is the most tedious part of it. And then, you know, now that we have these like digital scales that are like 1/10 of a gram accuracy, you kind of have to like, come on, you can't tell me that's not 0.2 grams already. Yes, see? Okay, that's good. So this Temu scale is cheap. I mean, meaning that it's, you know, inexpensive, but it's also like slow to respond. Now, I don't know if that's because it's this countertop is actually kind of bowed, so it's not exactly flat. That could be interfering because in other times I've used this, it doesn't react this slowly. Really, I should plane this down, but I probably won't use this scale here in the long term. It's good enough. Now, you don't have to do 5. Don't do 5. This is just ridiculous. I'm just doing this to illustrate what we're doing, how a cupping can be done. I would not recommend anyone to do this level of like granularity. Now, depending on the issue that you're having, you can use as many or as few samples as you want, right? Keith Nail, sorry, the letters are tiny on this screen and my eyes are getting. Keith Naylor, hello, how are you? Welcome to the show. Paige says, but they usually don't taste funky, just love the fruit tasting notes. I hear you. Hola to you, Peter. Peter does not like Temu. I like Temu. Temu's got some good deals. Okay, so what we're gonna grind this up. I got the grinder right here. This is our Compact R80. And we're going to grind it to, I don't know what grind setting we'll do. Let's see. All right, that's good. Now we're just going to grind them in bulk, or in sequence. So we've got our samples ground. You can see here they're somewhat coarsely ground, right? A little bit coarse. You can, and again, you can use any kind of grind setting. Where I like it to be a little bit on the coarser side. And then I like to line, you know, typically if you go to a cupping somewhere in the world of professionals, you will see them lined up like this. And there's certain protocols if you end up going to a commercial cupping that you'll probably want to follow. Like if you decide, so in the olden days, we always picked up the cups and smelled them, but only for the aroma. Now, if you do that, or only for the fragrance, if you do that, make sure, or if they allow, new protocols don't require you to do that. I still like it. If I do it on my own, I'm gonna do it because I enjoy getting it. I like to get close to my coffee. But otherwise, you just gotta, if you do pick them, so if you can pick them up, make sure you put them back in the order. So if you picked it up from here, don't put it over here and then move this over, right? You wanna keep it always in the same. That way, everything is always in the same position. And as you discuss things later, you will then be able to say, oh yeah, this cup was that. And then, but if this moves at some point in time, well, this cup is no longer the number 4 cup or number 2 cup, whatever it is from your perspective. So always make sure you put things back. And then if you're gonna do that, you wanna get down, but I like to bring it up. So we're gonna look at, typically when you get this done, you're gonna look at your fragrance. And fragrance, like I said, is the dry smell of the coffee. So we're just gonna take it, bring it close, inhale deeply. There's a little bit of spiciness that reminds me of like crab seasoning. Like here in Baltimore, we have a Maryland crab seasoning. So there's a spiciness to it that reminds me of that. And also another thing is that while I'm going to be talking about the experience of doing this, when you do this with other people, don't talk. Like the idea is that we're supposed to be in a quiet, contemplative environment. Mainly because you don't want to be there. What you don't want is like if you're sitting there and you're waiting, and some like blowhard is like, it smells like Old Bay Maryland crab seasoning. Then you smell it and you're like, well, does it, or does it smell like paprika, or do I smell kumquats or something like that? So we don't want to color people's impressions of the attributes of the coffee. We just want to so we'll typically have that form printed, and you write down your notes about whatever you think, and you'll think. So you may think that, oh, it smells like Old Bay seasoning. I'll write that down, Old Bay seasoning. So, but it reminds me of Old Bay. It's not truly Old Bay, right? But it's got this spiciness to it. And that has it also. Now, like I said, in modern times, after COVID, you're really supposed to come down and do that. Also, some of we'll go to those protocols later. Power plant says not an overkill. This is, the overkill if I had it in my house, right? Like I guess I do have that grinder in the house, the Maser Mater. Power plant says one thing that I think is a nice little luxury for coffee people is a desk vacuum for air. Yeah, definitely. I don't have a vacuum here. I haven't brought the vacuum here to the new space. I need to get I was actually thinking about that before we started. I was like, there's a couple of coffee grounds. I need to get a vacuum. If you have any recommendations for a vacuum, part of me would love to have the Festool CT15 here, but that is both a little bit overkill and a little bit large. Like this is a fairly small space. To even have a small of the vacs would be pretty big. Marcus says, I recently met my match in anaerobic beans with the Magnolia Costa Rica Finca El Cañal anaerobic. The fermentation funk was weighed. Oh, yeah. Something when we first started experimenting with anaerobic coffees, just over 10 years ago. The early ones that we played, that we sampled, had like deep, like blue cheese, like funk. It was like funky. You're like, gosh, that's crazy. That's crazy smelling, crazy tasting. Power plant says if they were really persnickety, they would not be allowing volatility to be escaping. And we like you will go to cuppings where they will have like coverings over the grounds. We're not doing that today because we're not that what's the word I'm thinking about here? We're not that we're not that special, maybe. I don't know. Anyway. Do as you want to do, right? If you feel that you want to cover it with little saucers, certainly do that. But then I would have to stock like how many saucers and that. Well, then again, yeah, you did. All right, so you've got it done. So once you've gone through it and you smelled it, then it's time to put the water. And so I like to, I'm gonna reboil the water just to make sure that it's nice and like más fuerte, right? Or más caliente, right? Well, something else that I like to have here also is a spittoon, right? I have a spittoon just for like when I need to dump out water, especially since especially right now, I'm not necessarily close to a sink where I can discard any kind of water or anything like that. Plus, at the end of the session, I can dump everything in here and get rid of it. Now, this is not technically a spittoon. Those of you who are from Southeast Asia might realize and notice that this is actually a rice steamer. So this spun aluminum bowl you put on a flame and with water inside, and there's this bamboo woven basket, the wedge shaped, kind of like a big Melita filter, and you put it in here and you put your rice and the steam cooks the rice. I got this at the Chinese, restaurant supply because I was like, oh, that looks like a spittoon. I'm going to use it, and it's relatively affordable. And especially if you're dealing with Western audiences, this looks like a spittoon. It's got that spittoon shape, so less to communicate where to put their waters. So now that that's boiling, we're going to pour the scalding water. It's scalding. And here, we're going to pour the water onto each of the cups. Now, here's the thing. When you pour the water, you want to pour it in a steady stream, and you want to have enough turbulence so that your coffee is fully hydrated, right? You want everything to be saturated, right? So I'm going to start to pour now. And you want to pour pretty forcefully. Like, don't be shy. And this is where the stag really kind of upset me, right? The EKG stag or stag EKG is when I was trying to pour this at a cupping with a stag, it would pour so slowly that I was just infuriated with it. And do stop right at the edge. Ideally, you want to bring it really close to the edge, right to the edge. But also you want to make sure that don't go too far to the edge, because there is going to be some level of degassing, and if you go too high, it'll like spill over, and it's just not it's not a big deal, but it's not as pretty. Peter says smells like coffee. Yeah, if you don't want to complicate it, it smells like coffee. That's really all you need. Now, I do have like fancy spoons. Oh, they're drying. I left them over at the other sink. But you don't need fancy spoons. I have tons of these stainless steel soup spoons that I got from the restaurant supply that are super cheap, super easy to use, and really, really great. Like, they don't have the bowl that the other ones have, but you don't need that. Just need a regular soup spoon. Perfectly fine. So now that we're in the middle, so when we pour the water, we're going to wait 4 minutes, right? So I started right at 26:45 on the show timer that I can see. So now while you're waiting, you're going to smell. So what you want is you want to get down close, right? Get down into it and smell. Like if you accidentally touch your nose to the coffee bed, you're doing it almost right. Not so close. So you just want to get down. And inhale deeply. Now, I'm not getting that spice. That spice is not really here. I get what I would call diatomaceous earth, like an earthy tone. And you don't have to go too long. Like sometimes I see these cats and they're all like, I don't know if you need to be that long. I tend to go pretty quickly. Especially when you've got a lot of samples to go through and everyone's pouring them at the same time, you want to get through it. Like, you don't really have 4 minutes may seem like a lot of time, but when you've got to like wait for these slow pokes, you're like, will you please sniff quickly? It's almost time to break. So we're going to get to the breaking point at the 4 minute mark, right? So when we break the coffee, we're going to use our spoon. And if you went to the profile, you're going to take the spoon, you can go sideways if you want. If you're a communist, you can go sideways. But if you're a coffee professional, you can go from the top. Get your nose really close, and you push it in here, right up against the edge, and then push back. And that will allow any kind of aromatics. The theory is that any aromatics that are stuck beneath the cap are going to escape and into your nose. So, like this, just once is enough, not two. And if you're with a lot of people, just do 1 cup. Don't do more than 1 cup. Let other people, have the opportunity to do the break. People get very excited about doing the break. People, it's a rite of passage. Like when you're starting out, you're like, I want a break. Can I do the break? Okay, so 30 minutes. Oh yeah, we're good. So now, just get in here. Oh, and now here's something else we need to do. We take our cup. We need to rinse between uses. That's one big thing. You want to rinse your spoon between samples. Now, I'm not getting much more than what I got before. So the diatomaceous earth is what I got, and I need another glass. Needless to say, I'm not doing this as often as I normally have done in the past, so I'm always forgetting something. So you have another glass, so you have a rinse glass, which I was kind of pressing that into service, but we can have a couple more. So we also want to have a clean cup for rinsing, and also now we want to skim this top of what's here. Maku says that by the way, those anaerobic beans I mentioned are double diamond anaerobic natural. Is double diamond, I've never even heard of double diamond. The only double diamond that I know of is from, my brother who may go snowboarding at double diamond trails in the American West or up in Vermont. Other than that, I have no idea what double diamond means. It's probably just marketing hype for, something to set your product apart from the rest and say, hey, this is a double diamond. Power Plant says that anything that gets codified to this degree is just... Yeah. And if you're doing this at home, if you want to do a cupping for yourself, you don't have to go through all this protocol stuff. But just in case you do want to go to like a cupping at a coffee shop or in some kind of like setting where there's other industry professionals, and this way, at least if you have an understanding of how this is done, you won't have to go there feeling totally like fish out of water, right? You'll at least have some kind of grasp on what is kind of expected. Okay, so now I take 2 spoons, right? And I like to do this, put it in here and swipe around, because we're gonna take the scum off the top and just kind of put it in there, swipe around, get it out, get all the stuff, because there's still stuff that's floating. There's scum, and then rinse, right? Rinse between cups. We're always rinsing. And what you do, the reason we rinse is not just for hygiene, which is not terribly hygienic to begin with, but more because you don't want to introduce, especially when you're going from between different coffees, you don't want to introduce flavors from one cup to another. Power Plant says, I did olive oil tasting and could only do it once. Yeah, that's the thing. When you have a lot of people, when you have people that are really into something, it does affected. They do get a little bit affected. I mean, this coffee thing is a precious word. Precious, that's the word we could use. It's very precious, very precious. But when it comes to the professional setting where you are cupping with a lot of other people, I do get why you need to be a little bit, and also like, especially now post-COVID, I think people are a little bit more, not hesitant, but have more heebie-jeebies about sharing cups. So there's the other protocols that you can use. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our rinse waters, which are kind of soiled now, right? We're just gonna dump those out into our spittoon or rice cooker and add fresh hot water. This will be our rinse water. Okay, so by this point, it's taken us a while, and I've been talking a lot, but you really kind of wait about 10 minutes from the time you start the pour to the time you taste. This gives the coffee enough time to brew and enough time for it to cool down to a point where it's, taste, right? Power Plant says, yes, learn the rules. I like to break the rules. That's Mom, good morning to you. How are you doing? And Ken says, the coffee came from my local roaster called Bergen Cafe Brennan. Cafe Brennan. But I checked just now, and it's out of stock. Well, popular coffee. But it's good. It's good, right? And Peter says, wine tasting our next level. Yeah, for sure. But I'm lucky that a lot of the wine guys that I know, they're not like one of my friends. He's like he should just be a sommelier. He's actually a he's a wine rep or merchant or whatever, wine rep. And so, it's always like cupping with him or tasting wines with him is always enjoyable because it's very relaxed. It's none of this pretense, none of this craziness. And I've had some beautiful wines with him. Like one of the more recent finds that he introduced me to was a place called Weingut Bastion, which is in the Rhone region of Germany. And if you like Rieslings and white wines, oh man, this beautiful minerality and sweetness. My gosh, I'm gonna go buy a bottle today. Now that you made me think about it. Power Plant says, speaks volumes how they grade coffee by using the immersion method. Oh, immersion. You mean this? Oh, this style. Yes. And it's also interesting that here's the thing. Like, if we were to do like a French press, maybe the French press would be similar. But let's say like we'll sit here for the next half an hour, 45 minutes, and taste the coffee. And the interesting, because the coffee has settled to the bottom of the cup, it doesn't really change the extraction of the water, of the fluid that's above that line. It stays very stable flavor-wise. But I totally hear you. Power Plant says, a lot of wine people are pretty laid back. That's a good thing. But to hear one of my friends also, who like a little bit old school wine guy, like I wish I'd wrote down what he said this one day we were talking, because we're talking about this new generation of like bio wines, the guys that are doing this natural fermentation, and he kind of went on this rant, and I was just laughing because I was like, the way that he described like the basic like staling or oxidation of the wine, and some of the biodiverse wines I've tasted have not been to my preference. But I was also kind of like, well, it's kind of like the Georgian wines, the ones that they bury in the ground. And I was like, it kind of reminds me of that, which I don't mind the Georgian ones. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our soup spoon, and if you have a nice cupping spoon, you can use that too. But I just use these. Like when we do cuppings, I just use these. I do have, like I said, I have my fancy ones. They're in the kitchen. I'm not going to walk over to get them. So you just take a little bit and fill. You don't even need a lot. I'm just, like, look at this. I'm not even filling the whole thing. And what you want to do is you want to slurp. Think of a spray bottle, right? And you take a spray bottle and you change the nozzle to wide spray. And that's kind of the idea, that you want to spray the liquid, the coffee, across the interior of your mouth by slurping, right? So, and that helps to aerate the coffee. Ooh, that's kind of pleasant. A little bit of dry finish. Now, if you go to a cupping with professionals, you will find more affected professionals, because you will hear all kinds of slurping sounds. And if you actually get them to admit and honestly about it, and you ask them, you're like, have you been practicing that? Some of them, the honest ones will tell you, yeah, they're practicing that. Like they have this like really loud, like a bird whistle almost. You're like, well, who does that, man? Who does that? I wish I could do that. I'm just not willing to put the time in. So this decaf that wasn't bad. That wasn't bad. Maybe a little bit hot. Sometimes it doesn't cool as fast as you might think. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking a taste of all of them, just to get an introductory taste, right? Just to get myself acclimated to it and familiar with it before. And you don't really, if you're looking at the form, you don't really want to do your full evaluation until you're further in. Like you might want to make notes on like what are the flavor attributes that you're tasting. But typically I wouldn't assign a score till later, because what we want to do is we're tasting it hot, but we want to let it cool down. So over the time of the cupping, the 30 to 45 minutes, this coffee is going to cool down, and you want to taste it periodically to get a better idea of how the coffee performs as it cools over time, and which gives you an impression of how the customer, the end user, may experience the coffee. Power plant says aspirate everybody's aspirating. M0, so let's hang in there, sir. Check your next week more frequently. Dev says, I'll practice when I make. So Dev, at your place, do you guys do like this kind of cupping, or not this kind of cupping, but do you guys cup your roasts or just drink the roasts? And that's another thing, like just because like I was saying that a lot of roasters will do these QC cuppings, a lot of times that's because they're doing multiple a part of that is going to be they're doing multiple batches a day, right? And here's the thing. So one thing to think about is that if you're roasting coffee, you do a cupping like this, you're trying to critically taste the coffee. However, this is not how the guests will be drinking the coffee. And when we do these kind of cuppings on the coffees we roasted, we keep that in mind, and that this is not exactly how the coffee will perform, because the coffee will be influenced. The flavor of the coffee will be influenced depending on the brew method. And at Spro, we would have like 7, 8, 9 brew methods. So we didn't just have like a big bun. We just had multiple ways of making it. So there's always going to be some variation. So this just gave us an idea of like, how is the coffee? Is it doing what we want it to do? Is it within the parameters that we're looking for? And that's good. And that will be good, right? Now, if you're, smaller roasting, meaning you're roasting smaller quantities, and you really have one way of brewing, I would brew it in that, right? But let's say you're a bigger roaster, you got like multiple batches a day. If you sat there with pour overs making like, 15 samples, it's a lot of work. Where this is, you lay it all out, you drop on the water, and you done. It's a bit more efficient, right? Peter says, I'm going to cup my own beans tomorrow. I have 4 different beans. How much grams per cup? I'm really kind of like, it's up to you. Like what I do here is, like I said, I do 13 grams for a 9-ounce cup. Now, you might recall that's different than our brew ratio. So our brew ratio is 2 grams for every ounce. So if you're gonna cup, use that. The important thing is that you're always doing it to the consistent. You're always maintaining a consistent standard, right? So we started doing 13 grams in 9-ounce cups many, many years ago. Maybe we started at 13 grams because maybe we used 6-ounce cups, and then we eventually moved to 9. And I don't remember why we had this standard. It's just been that way for many years, and I've been too lazy to challenge that, right? And of course, I'm only challenging myself, so that tells you a lot about me. But as long as you're doing it consistently, that's really the important thing. And in your case, Peter, like you technically cup your coffees every time you roast, because you tend to roast only for your cup. So That's the ultimate way to taste, right? It's the ultimate way. Dave says, I do both cup and drink. Ah, okay, great, 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 great. But I would say, here's something I would suggest for you, Peter. Like, if you want to try this, and I'd be interested, I would be very interested to hear your thoughts on this. And Dev, if you have the opportunity to do this as well, that would be interesting to know more. Like, when you roast your coffee, take a sample of that coffee and brew it immediately. Like, after you're done roasting, brew it then. And then, maybe think about how you liked it, what your response was, or make notes, or whatever you want to do. Then the next day, drink the coffee again, taste the coffee again in the same way. I'm curious to know what kind of results you find. Do you find that the coffee tastes better? And this is just totally to your taste. Does it taste better straight out of the roaster, or was it better the next day? Because the working theory that I have, that we tried here on the live stream quite a few months ago, is that, which was a surprising find, is that coffee cupped the next day actually has already reached a point of occlusion that is not as good as straight out of the roaster. And I made me question whether or not our practices of cupping the next day are as valuable as they could be. Power Plant asks, do cuppings grade up to 100 or down to 0? So it technically is a 0 to 100 scale. However, you never see anything below 70 because 70 is the cutoff for specialty. And if you look at the specialty grading sheets, there's really no room for anything below a 7 on the score sheet. So it's never that low. And if you're dealing with coffees that low, you're using the wrong method of, well, you're using the wrong method of evaluation. I think it's perfectly valid to use that if you want, but you won't have. And here's the thing also, like, think about it in terms of descriptors, right? But don't think about it so much in numbers. There's a scale, and I don't remember the scale perfectly offhand, but there's a scale written on the top of the form that says, that, well, I think 10 is extraordinary, 9 is excellent, 8 is very good, 7 is good. Maybe there's a 6. 6 is acceptable or average. When you're thinking about a score, think about the score in those terms. Like if you're thinking, oh, this is very good. Well, that very good is actually like an 8, right? So think of it that way. Or good is just it's just good. It's good. It's good. Don't think in terms of, because a lot of times people, like, I think when you think of numbers, we may be assigning a score that may not be necessarily reflective of the experience that we have. And this works in both ways, not just like, oh, I'm going to give it a 9, but I thought it was very good. I'm a 9. Well, that's not really. Or you may be like, oh, you know what? I think it's only a 7, but it was very good. Well, but 7 is only 7 is very good is 8, not 7, right? So think about. I encourage judges and cuppers to think in those terms because I think it helps guide you to a score more reflective of your experience. Peter's asking, what's ounce in metric? 1 ounce is 25 mils. Is that correct? 25 mils? I think it's the same as an inch. An inch is 25 millimeters, and I think an ounce is 25 mils. I would Google it, but I have my phone is being used for other purposes. Power Plant says gassy beans are a no-go. Yeah, gassy beans. And not that I'm sitting here tasting this, and according to my hypotheses, this should be pretty occluded. Not that I can necessarily tell, because I don't have a reference. I didn't brew anything yesterday. But there is something about it that does feel maybe tight. And now we got cooler, so now it's easier to taste. Nice warm tones. The coffee that I look for decaf is meant to be very pleasant, good sweetness, and there's good sweetness here. Again, more like the house coffee, accessible and not offensive, not too dramatic, right? Because drama in coffee can be offensive, right? Like and when I say drama, I mean, like, let's say like these things like that are anaerobic, the naturals, they tend to be rather dramatic coffees, especially like, let's say you have a natural that has some berry tones, like heavy berry tones, like blueberry tones, which I love, but I know that can be polarizing. So we don't want to, if we have some of that, we want to have a little bit, not too much, for a coffee such as this. Or like the anaerobic can be very funky, right? Depending on how you process it, it could be really, really extreme or really, really mild. Again, we're looking for coffees that are gonna, for this decaf, right? We're looking for a coffee that's going to be pretty accessible. Because we don't necessarily know who's going to try it. We don't have control over who's going to try it. So we would like them to have a pleasant experience. I think positive and pleasant is better than dramatic and like surprising for certain things, right? Peter says, I tried that. After 3 days, coffee taste got worse. Oh, but did it get better after 7? Powerplant says, my meaning was, do all coffees start at perfect 100 and subtract for defects, or do coffees start at 0? No, I would say, I don't look, I never thought of it that way. I mean, I don't think of it that way. I don't look at it that way. I think it's just more like we have a paper that is empty. And maybe the place to think about is that maybe it starts around the 7 or the 60 points, 60 to 70 points, somewhere around there. Because at this kind of war, in this end of the business, the specialty end, specialty coffee that you're receiving is going to be of a certain grade, at least, almost certainly at least 70 points or more, probably more than 80. So it's not, because by the time you get the coffee, it's already been through this lengthy process of being grown and the cultivation of that coffee, and then the harvesting of the coffee, the processing of the coffee. And the processing includes the way that it's stored, the way that it's handled, the way that it's sorted. So by the time you'll get it, you're not going to have like commercial grade coffees or even premium grade. Unlikely you'll have even premium grade coffees. You're going to have, you guys will have purchased green coffee from known suppliers that have specialty grade coffee. So it's going to be of a certain standard. It's not totally 0, but it's totally not 100. Like, so and one thing that, and if you go to like certain retailers or dealers, they will tell you like what the cup score they gave to this coffee is. And, even I will use that if I'm talking to an importer. I will use their cup scores as a general guideline to give me an idea of where the coffee might be. Now, I may or may not agree with them. I may or may not get the same attributes that they have in the coffee, but at least it's a starting point for us to look at. So you may go to like Sweet Maria's, and I think Sweet Maria's has grades on their coffees, and it may say like 82, and you're like, oh, 82, that's not 90 plus, but it's certainly not the price of 90 plus. And you may order that coffee and you roast it, you try it, and you're like, yeah, that's pretty good. And you know that they at one point have said it was an 82. Now, remember, when they give you a score and they give you a notes on that score, unless they put the date, you don't really know how long ago that was, right? Like, and coffee is an ever-changing thing, so it may have changed a little bit from the time that they wrote that review or that write-up. Also, depending on how you're sourcing the coffee or where you're getting from, this is what we call QC cupping, right? So these are production roasts, right? So this is like how we roast it for sale to our clients, to the consumer, and it's a finished product. Where a lot of times when you're actually doing grading for purchasing, you're not going to, I would not roast this coffee probably to this extent. I would roast it right up the first crack and then drop. because you want to roast it enough to get development, but you don't want to have enough development to start to cover up some defects that may lie in the coffee, right? And that's what the further you roast, you can roast some defecty things out of it. You can roast some characteristics out of a coffee. So a lot of times when you're doing cuppings, like truly critical cuppings, you'll do very light roasts. That way they highlight the potential defects that may exist. It won't give you the total experience that you're going to have for your guests. But the purpose also at that time is different because now you're looking to buy the coffee, to source the coffee. You're looking to see the quality of the coffee rather than later in the chain where you've already, the coffee quality has already been established. And now you're just, tasting. And plus the way that you roast your coffee will also have an impact, may also have an impact in the way that you enjoy it. And you may enjoy it more. But that's why I say encourage you not to think too much about like, we should start at 770, we should start 80, we should start at 0, we should start at 100 and subtract. I think that just puts too much burden on you to come up with the right score. Come up with the score that's most reflective of your experience, which is why I talk about like looking at the scale, thinking about descriptives scores in terms of descriptives so that you think, oh, this is very good. Very good is 8. Okay, 8, that's an 8. Or you can use four positions on the line. So 8, 825, 85, 875, or 9, or up to 9. So you think about it that way, like, it's very good, but maybe it's very good plus, maybe it's more than very good, but not quite not quite excellent. 875. So think about it that way, and then once you've done all that, once you've thought about the descriptives and then assigned the score that's tied to that descriptive to your score, then add it up and then see where you are. Like maybe you got it. Maybe you thought that 82 coffee was 80. Maybe you thought that 82 coffee was 85. It's not wrong, right? The only time that it may be wrong is when you're dealing in the larger industry and now you have to discuss coffee with other industry people and you have to have a common language to discuss that coffee. That's when you start to that's when you might cup with other professionals that are much more experienced than you, so you can kind of like discuss. So what we'll do is we'll discuss our tasting notes and scores after, to see where the commonalities are, to see where disagreements may be. And it helps me, especially as I was coming up, I would do this with, a number of people in the business. And I would, see what they thought what attributes were good, how they interpreted other attributes. And it helped me to frame where I am. And so maybe my 83 was really, or maybe my 85 was really an 82. Right? Because you can typically be more generous when you're starting out, right? Because you're like, oh, this is amazing. Because you haven't had the breadth of experience, all right? So some things to consider. Peter says, degassing the beans are only for people using an espresso machine. Too much CO gas hinders extraction. Yes, that's true. Paige says, I've been waiting for my boyfriend to tell me to stop with my funky berry forward coffees, but so far so good. He understands. A happy woman makes a happy life. Sounds like your man is no dummy. That's a good thing, and that's a good thing. Tiffany's with us. Good morning to you, Tiffany. How are you doing? Dev says, what's interesting is that Dak's Milky Cake Colombian Thermo-Shocked wash actually tastes better around the 3-month mark. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's so interesting. I got to say, that's the one coffee that you guys may talk about that I actually have tasted, at least last year's version. I was at the SCA show, hanging out with Hoon for a little bit, and Hoon was like, let's go taste the coffee at Dak. And I was like, all right, let's go taste the coffee at Dak. And we had the Milky White. It was pretty good. I don't really enjoy going to the roasters, what do they call that? Corral, or whatever they call it. But and those of you who may know, the Special Coffee Association has their yearly expo, which actually happens next week in Houston, Texas. And they have this roasters corral. They have an area where all of these roasters have set up little booths. They have these little booths set up, and the roasters are giving away. I don't know if they're giving away the coffee, they're selling the coffee. I don't know, because it's so crowded and so hectic. I'm just like, I don't really want to bother. I have so much stuff other to do at the show that I'm like, I don't have time to go sit around and drink coffee. I got to go cup coffees at the different cuppings. So there's a lot to do, Actually, I need to speaking of which, I need to book my flight and my reservations at the hotel, which I have done none of. But, you know, I just need to get on that. So we're going through this. Now, of course, if you're now I'm doing the rinsing thing, but if you're all by yourself, and for some reason, if you're all by yourself and you a crazy person that wants to taste your coffee in 5 different or 3 different or 2 different cups to see if you can find any defects. After you've gone through it and there's no defects, there are no defects, it's very clean coffee. You don't necessarily have to rinse between. You have to know the rules to break them. Then you can flaunt them. Actually, that's much nicer now that it's cool. Like, it's nice and sweet and a little bit of creaminess to it. So, pretty good, pretty good. Paige says, get on it, everyday close. I know. I mean, the flights aren't too bad. They're like $400, or I could cash in like 15,000 miles and fly. There's part of me that doesn't even want to go. I'm like, It's that, you know, like I'm an old curmudgeon now, old and curmudgeonly, but I should go. All right, so from here you'd score it out, right? And well, I guess we should do some scoring. Let me grab a pencil here. So the fragrance aroma we had was called an Old Bay and spicy. I'd say that was very good. So 8. The flavor, like I said, warm tones, very easy drinking. Nice and sweet, a little bit of creaminess. Actually, very good. So I'm gonna say 8.5. The aftertaste had a. What did I say earlier? The aftertaste. If you write this down, you'll remember. But now that I didn't write it down, I just said it so many minutes ago. Oh, it's a little bit dry. So early on, it was a little bit dry, but it's very clean. So it's I would say very good. Also very good. Not too difficult. Very good. Now, acidity-wise, so if you look at the scale, right, there's acidity. Acidity has this intensity scale, right? So there's high acidity, low acidity. This, I would say, is low acidity. But just because it's low or high doesn't mean that it's good or bad or, you know, better or worse. It just has to be complementary to the coffee. And in this case, that lower acidity is rather complementary. I would say it's very good as well. So very good. So also an 8. Now, body-wise, we're looking, there's also, if you look there on the scale, there's intensity as well. Well, not intensity, but I guess intensity. Low and heavy body, right? So that's kind of about the mouth feel, right? So this particular one is, I would say, more medium-bodied. And I would say that's also very good. Now we get to the part of when if you look at the score sheet, you'll see that the page asks us the nose, the fragrance, when we're smelling the dry aroma or the dry fragrance, had this spiciness to it, like maybe a paprika. I described it like Old Bay seasoning, right? The Maryland like crab spice, but that's not apparent in the flavor, right? That's not. It's just something about the fragrance and aroma had that characteristic. like I said, so uniformity, where there's three categories, maybe four categories, four, whatever, that have the little boxes, the 5 boxes. What we're looking for there is, are the cups uniform? Is there any cup in the 5 that are like anomalous to the rest? Are they consistent? And in this case, they are. So that's easy. That's an easy 10 because you don't really have a choice. The more that everyone that you knock off is 2 points, right? Oh, now I don't remember this one. I think balance. If you're looking at the score, you can tell me that. At one point in time, we used to give balance a score. Now I think balance, we only give it. It's also boxes, right? I just wrote down. I just wrote down on a piece of paper. Balance. So balance, if it's boxes, we're going to give it a 10. Clean cup is also the same thing, so 10. Sweetness, are any of them? Is it evenly sweetened? Is it evenly sweet? Meaning that even if the sweetness is diminished or low or maybe not at all, you're not going to knock it off because of that. But what we're looking for is consistency. Is the whatever level of sweetness that's in the cup, is it consistent across the 5? And again, that it is. Now, overall score, when we look at, we're looking for an overall score that is reflective of, or informed. The score is informed by the other scores. It's not an average of the scores, but it's informed by, like, for example, we have a lot of very goods, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 10, 10, 10. Forget the 10s, but just the 8s, right? If we were to say it's 7, 5, that would not make any sense. If we were to say 9, excellent, it wouldn't make sense either. So, you'd want to, like, you wouldn't expect to see that, right? So in this case, I mean, 8 would be very good, would be fine for that. So now we've got 40 points. So all these scores together gives us a score of 80.5 points. So perfectly fine. Not the highest graded score coffee. I mean, I think that I actually got this from a company called Genuine Origin, and I think they rated this coffee as an 82. I think it's their Valle de Cauca sugarcane decaf, and I think it's a very nice coffee. Very pleasant, very sweet, especially now that it's cold or cooled down a lot. The sweetness is much more apparent. It's a much more pleasant coffee to drink. You'd think I haven't been doing this for 20 years. Peter says, what about body? How do you discern that? So body is kind of like, I tend to equate it to being mouthfeel-ish, right? So when you're tasting the coffee, right? How does it sit on your palate, right? Does it feel full? Does it feel thin? I think that's how I would describe body as being. I hope that makes sense. And this is when you're trying to figure out these different attributes to coffees. This is why I think it is a nice idea if you can do tastings with experienced coffee professionals. Only because you get the ability, you get the opportunity to maybe understand their thought process of assigning a score. And, I can tell you a lot about the coffee this way. However, it doesn't, this cannot substitute for actually tasting the coffee with someone. So if we were all together and physically, if we were all physically together tasting this same coffee, I think it becomes a little more apparent because you now have the common reference of what I'm tasting. So so to me, that's a big plus, right? So if you have a coffee shop in your area that does like public cuppings, it might be fun to go and try it out and go every once in a while, at least just to get a feel for it, right? And the nice thing is that when you discuss things with people, you find that you may agree, you may disagree. A lot of times I find that I learn things from listening to other people. And one thing that I always encourage, like especially for like public cuppings with like non-professionals, and even for professionals, but when we do tastings at Spro, it was always like, whatever descriptor you may come up with, write that down, right? And I mean, I've heard some crazy ones, right? Like, I've had people tell me that it tasted to them like Led Zeppelin, or like it tasted purple, and you're like, and so the cynical professional part of you may be like, what the hell is that? But really, it's like, it's a visceral reaction to the coffee. Like, somebody tasted a coffee and they were like, Led Zeppelin. You're like, what? That's amazing, right? That, to me, that's amazing. Like, or you feel colors, or you feel something. I think any of those are totally valid and important ways to describe coffee, because when you're not, once you've been in the business for a long time, you've kind of built this, they give you this flavor wheel, the SCA gives you a flavor that, these are the flavors of coffee. No, because your version of strawberry may be I went to Virginia Dare one year to work on a strawberry syrup formulation, and Virginia Dare, which is a flavor manufacturer, they were like, well, we have, I said, I need to make a strawberry syrup. And they were like, well, we're at their labs. And I was like, they were like, well, we have a catalog of strawberries for you. But if you don't, we have 225 stock strawberry flavors. I was like, 225? What are you talking about? I was like, what? And then they're like, but if none of those meet your criteria, we can work with you to make one. And I was like, make one? I was like, 225? I'm just talking about strawberry, man, right? But like, but if you think about it, if you eat strawberries, you already know sometimes they're really amazing and sometimes they're not ripe enough. And all of those variants, somewhere between not ripe to becoming fully ripe and past ripe, are different flavors of strawberry. So those 225 flavors of strawberries lie somewhere in between that spectrum. So what that means is that it's always good to taste coffee with other people so that you have this reference point that you can share. Otherwise, it's kind of like, it's kind of like trying to understand some guy, some blowhard on the internet trying to tell you that body is heavy. A body is mouthfeel, right? It's always more, it's easier and more apparent when I can be like, when we could be here talking and like, okay, so this, I would describe this as being heavy. And you're like, okay, I get that. Power Plant says body is just an award for viscosity. That's good. That's a good way to describe it. That's a good way to describe it. All of these wheels are based in wine, so they could be completely wrong. Yeah, the wheels. Like, the SCA came out with a new wheel quite a few years back, and I was like, do we need a new wheel? Have flavors changed that much? Or is this just a money grab? When it comes to the SCA, it's always a money grab. There we go. Perfect. Peter says honey in your mouth versus maple syrup. Definitely a great way, much more eloquently put than I was able to figure out. Or milk. Absolutely. Oh, Power Plant said something else. You will have much less body when a filter brewed. Yes. Okay. That makes sense because we have the filter to clean it up. All right. So that's pretty much it for today. A little bit of coffee cupping. It's Thursday, isn't it? Oh yeah, it is Thursday. So if you're, like I said, on Thursdays, if you're If you'd like to talk, to chat a little bit more about coffee, I do a live stream on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. on the Ono Live channel, but it's mostly about cigars. So if you're not a cigar person, you won't enjoy it. But we do we do brew coffee or make coffee or talk coffee a little bit throughout the show, but it's mostly a cigar show. So other than that, back again tomorrow with another episode of the Coffee Q&A. So hope you have a wonderful day or night or slumber out there. Thank you, Mom. All right, so have a great day out there and see you next time.